Make your next move with American Express Business Platinum. You'll get 5 times membership rewards points on flights and prepaid hotels booked on AmexTravel.com. Plus, enjoy access to the American Express Global Lounge Collection. And with the welcome offer of 150,000 points, your business can soar to all new heights. Terms apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-platinum. Amex Business Platinum. Built for business by American Express.
Welcome back to I Want That Too, the podcast where Disney merch meets Disney history. I'm entertainment writer Jim Hill, and as always, I'm joined by the lovely Lauren Hersey.
Hi, Jim. How's it going?
It's going well. I did get a bit of sad news, which we're going to talk about in a moment or two. But I'm bearing up. All right,
well, we'll get into it. And you got some sad news, but I'm feeling like there's a lot of anniversaries and birthdays and everything happening around the Disney company. Is it just me, or do you feel like that's happening too?
Oh, no, absolutely. There's plenty of stuff to celebrate, and one thing for us Muppet fans to mourn, but we're going to get to that in a sec. So why don't you explain to the nice people what's coming up anniversary-wise?
Okay, well, let's talk about happy news first.
Okay.
Well, just a few days ago, it was the 5th anniversary of Galaxy's Edge opening in Disneyland, and just maybe like a month, I think, before, that was the anniversary for Disney World, which it is mind-blowing to me that was 2020. That feels like eons ago. I think I've lived 10 lives since 2020. So that was 5 years. I think I read Pluto, the good boy, he's turning 95 this year. And Daisy is a dapper and still sweet and cute as ever, 85. And Disneyland herself is hitting the big 7-0. That's a lot.
This is true. And in fact, my favorite felt friend, Kermit the Frog, is turning 70 this year as well, which brings me to the sad bit of news I was kind of alluding to. We now officially have a closing date for Muppet Vision 3D at Disney's Hollywood Studios. You did see this, right? They are closing on June 7th of this year. And what's interesting is that the attraction Muppet Vision and Pizza Rizzo across the way, those are closing on the 7th. Whereas Mama Melrose's Restaurant Italiano, that closes on almost a full month earlier, on May 10th. And as I understand it, that's largely because they're looking to change out that facility so it then becomes Harryhausen's, the sushi restaurant that we saw in the original Monsters, Inc. movie from November of 2001. And evidently, that's going to be a pretty big stylistic changeover, so they needed an extra couple of weeks to get into that building and get to work.
Yeah, I did see that. Hunter, my oldest, is graduating high school at the end of May. And we're like, we need to get down to Hollywood Studios one more time before Muppets closes. Now, we will not make it, unfortunately, for Mama Riz. Yeah, right. So we won't make it for that. But if we could get down one more time, so I think we're going to leave the day after his graduation party and hit the road and see Epic Universe, something new, and then something a little bit sad with.
Oh, you're a good parent.
3D.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
But, back to happy. Let's back to happy. Okay. So we're hearing a lot now about Cinderella's 75th anniversary, which is just coming up in a few weeks. Have you been hearing any buzz around that?
Yeah, it's a kind of interesting little bend on the story, and I'm trying to track this down. It turns out the world premiere of Cinderella wasn't held in LA. It wasn't held in New York. It was held in Boston, Massachusetts.
What?
Uh, yeah, it was held February 15th, and I'm pretty sure it was in what's now known as the Opera House in Boston, which back in the day was the old RKO Theater here in town. And that was the thing. During that time, all of Disney films were released through RKO. And so I don't know what the theater owner in Boston did to pull strings to get the premiere of Cinderella held in Boston, but it was held there. So, trying to work up a story about that. But anyway, back to other anniversaries. As you mentioned, we also have, in fact, it's kind of ironic that the place that got built because Walt had money after Cinderella, and that was Disneyland.
So, I mean, I know it's Sleeping Beauty's castle, but like we have to thank Cinderella for that.
We do.
So, with all these anniversaries, especially Disneyland, we know that we're going to be getting some amazing merch, and we have some fun updates to talk about today. So, but before we get into all of that merch related news, why don't we go ahead and give a big shout out to our sponsor?
Absolutely. And this episode of I Want That Too is brought to you by our friends at Be Our Guest Vacation. And planning a Disney vacation, these folks are the real deal. As a platinum-level earmarked travel agency, Disney recognizes Be Our Guest Vacations as one of the best. Their expert agents handle all of the details, so you can just show up and enjoy the magic. And by the way, it's not just Disney. Be Our Guest Vacations also has you covered when it comes to Universal, cruises, and more. And the best part is, their services are completely free. So you want to learn more? Head on over to beourguestvacations.com and let them take care of everything. All right, so we get to the news, and we were just talking about Disneyland 70th. So what do we got? What do I have to start saving my shekels for now?
I'm assuming a lot. So I think it was a couple episodes we talked about all the festivities coming to Disneyland, but it was just announced earlier this week that there is a new store. They're kind of, shuffling things around at Downtown Disney. So the new store is the Disney Storyland Boutique, and officially opening January 24th in Downtown Disney.
Okay.
And what's cool about this store, they're calling it the Store of Stories, and it's going to have a different theme and different merch at different times throughout the year. I thought this was a really interesting concept. One with the anniversary and probably people that normally wouldn't be at Disneyland. So giving them something different, special to, see, experience, and, take home. So, I mean, one of the things we've talked about on the show before is like how, in my opinion, the merch at Downtown Disney is kind of a little lackluster. Like, it's the same merch, like, in the parks, like whatever store you're in, where Disney World seems to have more variation. So something that they're taking from Disney World, from Epcot specifically, for the opening theme, which is very, very interesting. It's the kawaii, the super cute, like in the Japanese pavilion at Epcot, like the cute culture. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Wow. Okay. That's an interesting bend on this. I mean, a smart way to start, certainly.
Yeah, and I mean, they're going to have other, like, classic characters. They're selling, like, Winnie the Pooh, Stitch, Baymax. But I thought that was a really, really fun addition for Disneyland because they don't have anything like that. I mean, I'm just trying to make sense. Like, what made them decide on that first? I mean, any, like, speculations?
Well, now you have to remember, in regard to California, that it's different than Walt Disney World. You have a lot of locals that will turn out a month in, month out. And so a store like this that constantly changing theme and something like that, where you start off with the super cute stuff that you can only in theory get if you go to Tokyo Disney. That's a smart play. That will get your diehard collectors to at least come out for your first couple of weeks that the store is open, and then to churn, so to speak, to bring in fan favorite characters like Pooh and Stitch and Baymax. Again, smart play. Now, where is this going to be located in downtown Disney?
Yeah, like I said, there's a lot of shuffling around
Mm-hmm.
happening in downtown Disney right now. So this is going to actually be in the former Disney dress shop,
Mm-hmm.
which, I believe was just kind of shuffled into that
Mm-hmm.
space. And then the Wonderground Gallery, it
Oh,
moved into a smaller space.
that's
So
actually a really interesting piece of real estate because that's relatively close to where folks go in and out of the Grand Californian if they're staying there at the park.
yeah.
From a foot traffic point of view, that makes sense. Likewise, people coming up the hill from the Disneyland Hotel, yeah, that's a smart play.
Yeah, and I think there's, some additions also coming with the renovations with Porto's Bakery and then Arthur and Sons
Hmm.
Steakhouse also coming. So I support the refresh. Well, we guess we'll have to stay tuned and see what's next. But they're shuffling that deck often, it seems like.
Okay, okay. All right, so what else you got?
All right, so this is just kind of general merch,
Hmm.
but we talked about before the new year some of the things that were coming as far as collectibles
Hmm.
go for 2025. And I talked about the Irresistibles. They're the new collectible, like mini 3D
Hmm.
ears. The first one that came out was like the old school Mickey Mouse Club house, the Mouseketeer ear hat
Hmm.
from 1955. And this one is $16.99.
Hmm.
That came out at the beginning of the year. Shortly after, we got to see Sorcerer Mickey. We got a classic Mickey. And earlier this week, the collection is continuing to expand.
Hmm.
So the latest is perfect for our princess fans. And it is, just in advance of Cinderella's 75th
Hmm.
anniversary.
Okay, and looking at a photo here that you shared of that, what's interesting is, what is it? We have Cindy on one ear, we have a 75 on the other, and then it looks like they went with the Cinderella logo from the original poster back in 1950. So, yeah, I can see why Disney fans might go for that one.
Yeah, and I think there's going to be a lot more of these
Hmm.
this year. You can kind of see behind that picture that I sent you, like the
Yeah,
Sorcerer
yeah, look at
Mickey.
that. Okay.
Yeah, and so this one, as far as I know, is just at Walt Disney World,
Hmm.
and still have a couple weeks before the anniversary, which I think official kickoff is February 15th.
Hmm.
And I did see on social media that like Disney World was teasing a new Cinderella Spirit jersey, which I'm really excited about. And they were kind of clever with their reveal. They only showed like a wee little like sliver of what it's going to look like, but I think it's going to be similar to what we're seeing in the Irresistible
Hmm.
collector's item. Oh, which, by the way, is not $16.99. Cinderella is $24. She is classy, so she deserves an upcharge.
I was about to say, you pay extra when she got glass shoes. But anyway.
Gotta fund Disneyland's 70th somehow.
There we go.
Gotta keep it going.
All right. So who else is getting in on the Cinderella 75th anniversary celebration?
Yeah, so I just refreshed my memory because when Brandon from Cakeworthy was on the show in the fall, did he tell us that he was going to have a line in Disney or just a general line for the 75th anniversary? Do you remember?
I want to say yes. In fact, I think he showed us a few shirts to that effect, though I don't know if he did that off air, and maybe we shouldn't be talking about this right now. Oh, did I say that? No. Okay, never mind.
Shop at Cakeworthy, and he'll forgive us.
Okay.
But also, so we're just starting to see now some of the 75th anniversary merch for Cinderella. So another one that I noticed, if you are a Dooney and Burke fan, is that they have a special bag that is only available at the Disney store.
Oh.
And this design is so pretty.
Okay.
It's like really pretty. It's light blue. You get to see Jacques and Gus. And I mean, really the star of this purse is the like glass slipper. Now it is $248, but I think there are a lot of Cinderella fans out there. This one is a crossbody. So if you want to get your hands on that, I would head over to the Disney store and check it out. But I have to say, $248 seems like a drop in the bucket compared to the most expensive item at Walt Disney World that has a Cinderella tie. Jim, do you know what I'm talking about?
I think I might have actually seen this over at Disney Springs, but do you want to tell the nice folks what we're talking about here?
Yes. So you can maybe give us a little bit of the backstory, but in Disney Springs, you can see Cinderella's castle proper, like the gray and blue version. And it has 678,000 hand-placed crystals, and this is the most expensive item at Disney World, and it costs $285,000.
Oof. I mean, it's beautiful. And as I understand it, thousands of hours went into the creation of this thing, right?
Yes. From what I could find out, because I'm like, how does something like this even come to be? 3,835 man hours. And it should be no shocker to anybody that they only made 50 of these worldwide because each one takes 6 months to produce. Like, no wonder they have to charge almost $300,000. I mean, it's just under the median house price for the United States.
No.
But if you have that kind of dough, I mean, it is a beaut, I must say.
Yeah, it is. Now, what's kind of interesting is, again, think about it. They only made 50 of these pieces, but as it turns out, there are 24 Erebus Brothers stores at Disney parks worldwide. So, in effect, this is basically, we have one to put out on display and we have one in the back room. So when that deep-pocketed customer comes along and actually buys this, we can bring the other one out. But yeah, the Rebus brothers have a fascinating history with the Disney company. In fact, what's interesting, Lauren, it goes all the way back to the 1964-1965 New York World's Fair. And the Erebus brothers had come over as part of the Spanish contingent. They had their pavilion there on the grounds, and the Erebus brothers were doing glass sculpting there. And so who comes through the pavilion, this main pavilion one day, but Walt Disney? And Walt is immediately taken with what the brothers are doing and reaches out and says, after the fair is over, if you guys would like to come to Disneyland, we'll set you up with a shop there. And I mean, hell, we'll set you up with a shop inside of Sleeping Beauty Castle. And the brothers are, of course, thrilled that Walt does this. But where this gets fascinating, Lauren, is, again, they've been associated with Disney since 1967. Walt died in December of 66. So it was one of these things they didn't even have a handshake. They had a verbal agreement with Walt himself to the effect of, you come to California, we'll set you up at a shop in Sleeping Beauty Castle.
And I'm like, who's going to believe that?
Well, no.
Hey, I met Walt, and he says I can come set up my shop in the castle. When can I get in? When can I get the keys?
Yeah, and it's just, it's one of these things where, thank goodness, I guess Walt had actually talked about these brothers to somebody back at the office, but because they honored it. And it turns out that their tiny little shop inside of Sleeping Beauty Castle was so popular that eventually the folks at Disneyland, all right, okay, clearly we need to give you a bigger space. So they actually gave them a shop down on Main Street, USA.
Where was it in the castle? Do you know?
Well, I mean, as I understand it, as you walk into the castle heading into Fantasyland, it was immediately on your left.
It's like the size of a closet.
No, that's it.
It's
exactly.
tiny.
But that was the other thing that was what made the folks at the park kind of sit up and take notice, because it's like, nobody can get through the castle. It's like, why? Because people are standing and they're watching those guys do the stuff with the glass blowing. So it's like, all right, let's put them down on Main Street and give them a big window so people can see them coming and going. And in fact, that's the irony, is that once they were down on Main Street, they started doing double the business, because they literally caught people coming and going to the park. And then from there, it's like, well, no, we got to have one of these in Walt Disney World. So it opens with the park in 1971. And then from there, every Disney park, it was especially the castle parks, opened with these things. And then over time, for example, with the one that was at Downtown Disney and later Disney Springs, it's just people would come back to the stores and they would get to know the individual artists who were making these things. And like I said, we're now at 24 of these stores worldwide. And people just come in and are fascinated to watch the artist's work. And then, well, I got to have something. They're making money hand over fist. And then they do these amazing display pieces like the Cinderella Castle statuette you were talking about for $285,000. So
I know. But listen, I mean, like, even into the 60s, Disney was about the collabs. Like, Walt knew, he understood.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's why we have some of the nice things that we have today.
This is true.
So what an interesting side story. I swear I learn something new every day. All right. So when we come back from the break, Jim is going to be telling us more about Cinderella, and I can't wait. So stay with us.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Upgrade your business with Shopify, home of the #1 checkout on the planet. Shop Pay boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning fewer carts going abandoned and more sales going cha-ching. So if you're into growing your business, get a commerce platform that's ready to sell wherever your customers are. Visit Shopify.com to upgrade your selling today.
Hey, Atlanta, Apple is open for small business. That's right. We're here to make starting and running your business simpler. With privacy and security built in on all devices, it's easy for you to protect your customers' data. And if you need hardware or software support, you'll get advice from business experts at no cost whatsoever. So you can focus more on the soup du jour and less on, the other stuff. At Apple, we're open for your small business. Go to apple.com/small business or visit an Apple store to learn more.
I think you're on mute.
Workday starting to sound the same?
I think you're on mute.
Find something that sounds better for your career on LinkedIn. With LinkedIn Job Collections, you can browse curated collections by relevant industries and benefits, like flex PTO or hybrid workplaces, so you can find the right job for you. Get started at linkedin.com/jobs. finding where you fit. LinkedIn knows how.
And we're back. All right, Jim. So what do you know about Cinderella that I don't know?
Well,
Are you going to tell me about?
all right. So let's start at the top. The Walt Disney Company would like you to think that the 75th anniversary of the release of Cinderella is coming up next month. They're wrong.
Are they just trying to sell the spirit jerseys?
Well,
What's the real story?
okay. I guess I should be clear here. If we're talking about the very first version of Cinderella that Walt ever made, and that would have been the 7.5 long minute Laugh-O-Gram short, the one that was released at theaters back in December of 1922.
So already you've told me something that I did not know.
Well, now this was a black and white cartoon. It actually predated Disney Studios. That wouldn't be formed till 10 months later, on October 16th, 1923 to be exact. And that's, by the way, where we get D23. And this Laugh-O-Gram, Cinderella, was actually the last of the series. It was produced in Kansas City, Missouri, at the animation operation that Walt and Ub Iwerks set up on the second floor of the McConaughey building on East 31st Street. And by the way, just last year, November of last year, thank you, Walt Disney Inc., which is the organization that's based in Kansas City. They launched a $4 million campaign to restore the 2-story brick building that Walt and Ub worked in. And if you want to learn more about their efforts, go check out their website. It's Thank You Walt Disney, all one word, no spaces.org. Okay, so we have that version of Cinderella that Walt did in 1922. If we jump ahead a decade to 1932, Disney Studios has just released its first ever cartoon in Technicolor. This is Flowers and Trees, a silly symphony that caused such a sensational alarm when it first arrived in theaters in July of 1932 that it then went on to win the first ever Academy Award for Best Animated Short. And by the way, that Oscar was the very first Academy Award that Disney Studios ever won. And Walt was eager for another win. So he's like, okay, what are we going to do for a follow-up to Flowers and Trees? And he thinks, hey, Cinderella, what about that? And so a script is put together for this proposed animated short. That's written in December of 1933. And Frank Churchill, the guy who would eventually go on to write the score for Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and Dumbo, not to mention contribute songs to Disney's version of Bambi and Peter Pan. He's assigned to write a score for Cinderella. I mean, the silly symphony version, just to be clear here. Okay?
I don't know how I feel about that, but okay. I'm following.
Now,
it's tracking.
Here's the interesting part. That animated short is never made. And this is because Walt learns that his chief competitor, Max Fleischer, is working on an animated version of this very same story. Not
Cinderella?
Cinderella. Not only that, but the Fleischer film, which is would eventually be entitled Poor Cinderella, was going to be built around Betty Boop.
This story is so weird.
Well, but seriously, it's about to get weirder because I'm going to send you to take a look at this because there's a wonderful restored version of this short available on YouTube right now. But the thing is that Poor Cinderella is the first Max Fleischer cartoon ever to be done in color, but it's not done in 3-strip Technicolor. It's done in a different filmmaking process called Cinecolor, which really leans into red and greens. So you as you watch this thing, it's like, wow, I had no idea that Betty Boop was a redhead. And by the way, I mean, don't get me wrong. It's a little investment in time. It's the cartoon's 10 minutes and 30 seconds long, and it's worth taking a look at because during this time, Max Fleischer was toying with this amazing innovation in animation. He would take the animation cells and put them on a turntable in front of a three-dimensional background, literally a diorama of, in fact, when you watch this thing, when Cinderella's coach is riding, is going to the castle, there's a three-dimensional background moving with this piece of animation. Or when you're in the palace and the prince is dancing with Cinderella, there's a three-dimensional crowd behind them that's paper cutouts. I mean, it's well worth checking out.
She does look like I Love Lucy.
She does. She
just
does.
pulled it out.
Okay.
She's very cute. Very cute, though.
All right. So anyway, Walt learns that Fleischer already has his own version of Cinderella in the works. More to the point, if they decided to go forward with their Cinderella, that silly symphony would be beaten into theaters by Poor Cinderella. In fact, Paramount Pictures, which released all of Max's productions in the 30s, they'd put Poor Cinderella out in theaters in August of 1934. And so Walt decides, knowing that, it's like, all right, we're going to table that project. But irony here is that even as Walt is abandoning the idea to do Cinderella as a silly symphony, in the late winter, early spring of 1934, this is when Disney Studios begins development of its first ever full-length animated feature, which, of course, is Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Okay, we now another time jump. We jump ahead now 13 years to 1947. And Lauren, I'm not going to lie, this is a pretty desperate time at Disney Studios.
More desperate than Poor Cinderella.
Ooh. Well, I mean,
Sorry.
Poor Cinderella at least had a fairy godmother. Walt didn't have a fairy godmother. What he had was the Bank of America, which at that time he owed $4 million to. And that was largely because during the war years, a number of Disney's feature-length films, because they couldn't be released overseas, they lost money. In fact, Pinocchio and Fantasia alone each lost more than $1 million apiece. And so the last time Disney puts a real full-length animated feature out in theaters is August of 1942. By the way, Bambi also manages to lose money. And so Walt has actually at this point stopped making full-length animated features and is making instead what he called package features. These are those animated films that collect a lot of little different segments with the idea that if you put all these short pieces together, you eventually get something that you can send out into theaters that's almost feature length. And so this is how we got things like Saludos Amigos, which went out into theaters February 43, Three Caballeros, February 45, and then Make By Music, April of 46, and then finally Fun and Fancy Free in September of 47. And now, same time, Disney Studios is experimenting with doing live-action movies that feature sizable chunks of animation. There was first Victory Through Air Power, which arrived in theaters in July of 43, and then Song of the South, which Disney released to theaters in November of 46. And Lauren, unfortunately, with the exception of Song of the South, none of these more recent movies that Disney Studio was making in the mid-40s were connecting with audiences. And the folks up in San Francisco, which is where Bank of America had its corporate headquarters, were starting to get antsy about that $4 million, that debt load that they were now carrying for Disney Studios. But where this gets interesting is to help service that debt, Disney Studios actually put Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs back in theaters in the States during World War II. It goes out into theaters February of 44. And by the way, this is the first time Disney had ever done this, re-released one of its feature-length animated films. And both Walt and the bankers up in San Francisco were amazed at how much money this re-release of an animated fairy tale made. Snow White actually wound up being one of the Hollywood's top earners for all of 1944. So we're back to 1947 now. And Walt has another package feature in the works, Melody Time, which it's going to go out into theaters in May of 48. And he's got another largely live-action movie, which features animated scenes. That's so dear to my heart, and that's going to go out into theaters in November that same year, 48. When Walt gets a call from the Bank of America, and they're like, we'd like to have a meeting. And so Walt goes up to San Francisco. And the gist of the meeting is the bankers don't think that Disney's current business plan is going to be able to bring down that $4 million debt load anytime soon. Not with the sort of movies that Walt has been making lately. So this is why they tell him, we'd really like to see Disney Studios make another Snow White. And by that, I mean, they want another feature-length animated fairy tale with music. But here's the thing, Lauren. Maybe you've heard the story about Walt and You Can't Top Pigs with Pigs. That after, for example, when the original Three Little Pigs Silly Symphony came out, and was such a huge hit in 33 that everybody was clamoring, oh, make more films with pigs. And Walt was like, really? It's like, all right, well, we'll make a couple. And they didn't do nearly as well. The Three Little Wolves and A Practical Pig and that sort of thing. They just did not connect in the same way. And Walt was like, all right, so let's not repeat ourselves, guys. And so that's the thing. He said, like, well, you know, I did this before. I did Three Little Pigs. Now, I don't like to repeat myself. And he felt like, look, I've already done a feature-length fairy tale. On the other hand, prior to the outbreak of World War II, Disney Studios had done all of this development work on feature-length versions of Peter Pan and Alice in Wonderland and The Wind in the Willows, and all of that artwork was sitting down in Burbank in the studio's files. And so if Bank of America would be okay with Disney Studio reviving one of those projects, Walt would be happy to go back down to the studio and get that particular animated feature in production ASAP. But that's the bankers in San Francisco were insistent. Peter Pan, Alice, and Mr. Toad weren't going to cut it. They wanted something like Disney's Snow White. They wanted a full-length animated fairy tale. And more to the point, Bank of America might be willing to even help finance such a production.
They literally held the purse strings.
Oh, totally. And so, Lauren, not to belabor the obvious here, this is how we actually wound up with Disney's Cinderella.
Wow.
Which, if we're being completely honest here, was something of a command performance, at least when it comes to Walt's role in this project. Bank of America, because again, it was holding that $4 million debt, asked politely, perhaps insisted, that Disney make another Snow White, a Snow White-ish movie, and Walt complied.
My mind is honestly blown. And like, I think people would be surprised how we actually get the things that we get.
Yeah.
But this one, I mean, like, it's blown my mind a little bit that the Bank of America is to thank for Cinderella and ultimately Disneyland then.
Well, see, now that's what's fascinating. Now, just to be clear here, Walt goes down, and Walt is enough of a professional, and more to the point, he has amazing artists and animators and storymen who work in his studio. And with these marching orders, they still managed to deliver an incredibly entertaining film. One, as you mentioned, that is so hugely popular. When it was released to theaters in February of 1950, well, first of all, based on the ticket sales of Cinderella alone, Walt is able to pay down the entire $4 million that he owes Bank of America. Not only that, but, and you'll love this, on the sales of Cinderella merch, that's what funds the initial development of Disneyland Park in Anaheim.
Wow.
And then the kicker, the absolute kicker to this, due to the success of Cinderella, well, first of all, that puts an end to any Disney package features, but it now allows Walt to go back to the files, to those films that they'd already done all of that work on, Alice in Wonderland and Peter Pan, and get those films in production. So Alice comes out in July of 1951, Peter Pan comes out in February of 1953, and we even get a Lady and the Tramp, which comes out just a month before Disneyland opens in June of 1955. But that said, even though Cinderella features what Walt often said was his very favorite piece of animation that had ever been done by an artist at his animation studio. That, by the way, is the scene where the fairy godmother magically transforms the rags that Cinderella is wearing into that beautiful ball gown. But Walt had a complicated relationship with Cinderella. Because again, yes, it's the movie that saved Disney Studios, finally got them out from under all of that debt that they accumulated during the war years. But at the same time, Walt resented the idea that it was the folks at Bank of America who had effectively told him, you need to go make another Snow White-like movie. And again, because they were saddled with all this debt, and the history of animation companies. In fact, Max Fleischer lost control of his studio because Paramount actually pulled the loans that he owed them for making Gulliver's Travels and Hoppity Goes to Town, two feature films. So Walt knew this could happen. The bank could take the studio. But he had no choice at that time. He had to do what the bankers asked for. And in spite of the fact that Walt did not like to repeat himself. No! Speaking of repeating himself, it is worth noting that if you take the time to watch the Laugh-O-Gram version of Cinderella, it features prominently a cat character. In fact, Cinderella's fairy godmother actually turns that cat into Cinderella's chauffeur, and by that I mean she conjures up a car that now the cat drives. Still stays a cat, and he takes the little Ash girl to the ball, but then the cat gets out of the car and escorts her in, where now Cinderella's cat dances with the prince's dog at the ball, and those two, along with Cinderella and the prince, they fall in love, and at the end there are two happy couples. But anyway, if we jump ahead now to Disney's feature-length version of Cinderella from 1950, that also prominently features a cat, but this feline is no friend of our heroine.
Yeah, he's me. Yeah, he's a bad guy.
Yeah, Rucife is one of the main villains of the piece, a comical villain for most of the movie, but I just find it funny that some 25 years after he first made the Laugh-O-Gram version of Cinderella back in 1922, here's Walt as his animators, the artists and story people are beginning to develop a feature-length version of this very same tale in 1947, telling the guys, be sure and put a cat in there somewhere. They're funny. So there you go.
Well, heck of a story. It all goes back to Cinderella. And I'm serious. Take Jim up on, do a quick Google search on poor Cinderella, because Betty Boop is looking, she's looking something. There's something else there.
Again, what's fascinating, if you look at a Disney Silly Symphony from the same time, which is done in the 3-strip color format. I mean, it's beautiful, vivid colors, where Cinecolor, as I understand it, only used 2 strips. And again, it was red and green.
Yeah, and the fairy godmother kind of looks like a mermaid.
She does.
As I'm looking here. Well, Jim, on that note of our red-haired Betty Boop and the mermaid fairy godmother, I do think it is time we close up shop for today, sir.
I
and if you want to stay up to date with everything happening across the Jim Home Media Podcast Network, just make sure you're following along on Facebook, Instagram, X, That's where we're posting all the latest news from all of the podcasts. So you won't miss a thing. And while you're at it, if you wouldn't mind leaving us a review, it helps support the show, tells the algorithm you like what we're doing.
There we go. And don't forget, if you've got questions or suggestions for future episodes of I Want That Too, Lauren and I would love to hear from you. And you can reach out anytime on social media or email us directly. I'm at jim@jimhillmedia.com, and Lauren, you're Lauren at laurenhersey.com. Am I right?
You're correct, Jim. All right. Well, I think that is it for today. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time on I Want That Too.